So I'm sure you've had a page or a component or something you've had to build where when people click on it with their mouse, it gets a focus state and then that focus gets stuck. So like, even though I'm not hovering anymore, it stays big, and then it's kind of awkward when that happens because I sort of want to click and I don't want it to gain focus. I just want it to be clicked. But I do want to make sure that I can go with my keyboard and actually focus on things and then know what I'm focused on with my keyboard. And luckily, there's a really easy way to do that with CSS. If you'd like to know what it is, stick around. Hi there, my friend and friends, and welcome back to yet another video. I'm so glad that you've come to join me. And if you are new here, my name is Kevin, and here at my channel, I help you fall in love with CSS. And if I can't make you fall in love with it, hopefully I can at least help you be a little bit less frustrated by it. And this is one of those perfect videos for that, where we can look at a nice, really simple CSS solution to something that has been around for a while and is a little bit annoying. I will just say that browser support is not 100% on this. Pause the video now and leave a comment down below to guess which browser may not be supporting this quite yet. And I'm not talking about Internet Explorer because I don't count that as a browser anymore, and neither does anybody else really. All the big guys don't support it, so don't worry about Internet Explorer. But there is another one, but we'll talk about what happens in those situations closer to the end of the video. But for now, let's jump into the code and see what this is all about. All right, so let's take a look at what the issue that usually comes up with. So we have these buttons here, and right now when I hover, there's nothing happening, which is kind of terrible. So let's come on and say we have a button hover. And we're going to come back to do the focus in a second, but I just want to do the hover for now. And what we'll do is we'll just do a transform. And you might have already guessed why I was doing a transform, just based on the transition that's up above. And we can do a transform of scale and say like a 1.1 or something, just so it gets a little bit bigger when we hover on top. And I'm going to exaggerate this a little more than I normally would, just so we can see they really pop like that. And one of the issues when you have buttons like this is people will come and focus on them, and look at that. Outline now accepts border radius and follows the border radius of something, which is absolutely amazing. And so one thing that you could do, other than what I'm going to do in this video, if you wanted to simplify things, we could just come in and say button focus and say outline offset is say 0.25 rem or something, or m, and whatever you want, a value, and then we can offset that number a little bit. Let's make it a bit bigger so it stands out, and you can see that ring is now like popped off a little bit, which is nice. And one of the things that's really nice with this default style that comes with Chrome is, let's just say here I do body background is 333, so it's a nice dark color. That outline will switch to white just by default. So it always choose by default the high enough contrast to make sure that you can actually see it. So right away, that's something cool. And you know what? Let's leave it like that. Let's not even, I was originally going to throw my focus here on my hover and just make them the same, or we could do the same thing. Let's just do it everywhere. Focus. So now when we go on those, it gets bigger, and not only does it get bigger, but we also get that ring that sort of shows up around it with the outline. One really interesting thing now is if I tab onto these, we get those, and I can push enter and we get a little thing that opens and closes. If you want to see how I did it, the JS is down there somewhere. It's really nothing too important in my CS. Look at that, I broke CodePen. Anyway, when we come through here, we get that, and then we can click and open it and click and close it. But one thing that's interesting is if I just click with my mouse, the ring doesn't appear. That outline isn't there. And then you can see as I go through, and right now these are just toggles. So we run into this issue where it's staying large because it's staying in the focus state. And the focus state and it's not doing it here because the default for that outline actually uses something called focus visible. And what we're going to do is actually throw a focus visible over here as well. And what focus visible means is the browser sort of tries to figure it out on its own. So if I come and I click on it and I move my mouse away, it's not taking that focus state. We haven't gained focus on my button because I've just clicked and we're just getting a hover because I have a pointer device. And the browser's smart enough to know that. Whereas if I tab onto something, well, now we still get that outline that's coming, and I can open and close it, and then I can tab over to the next one. I can open and close it. If I hover and go off, or if I click on that, it just takes everything away. And this is why I really think for most interactive elements that you're building, where it's not a link to another page, because for links, just having a focus state makes a lot of sense, because once you click the link, you should be going somewhere else anyway. But for buttons and for interactive things where something happens, it is kind of annoying when you click on it and then that focus state gets there and then it's gone, and focus visible solves that problem. And I told you I'd talk about browser support and what happens when browsers don't support this, and the big culprit, you might have guessed, is Safari. And sadly, it's not even in the technical preview yet. I read somewhere that it's behind a flag in the technical preview, even though other browsers have supported this for quite a while. But c'est la vie, we got to move on, and we got to, I still think this is something that's worth doing, and luckily building in a fallback is very simple. The one thing we don't want to do, because sometimes you can get away with like having a focus and then a focus visible after that sort of overwrites it, but for this one that doesn't really make sense, or it doesn't really work. So one way we can do that is we could take advantage of, so I'm going to bring the focus visible back here, actually I said I'm going to bring it back. I don't want that. I want to have this here like that. Actually, this is going to be like our default, our fallback if things don't work. And then if the browser supports focus visible, we can do something with that. So we can use @supports. And if you don't know @supports, I have made a video on it, and that is linked down in the description. Should be a card popping up for it too, if I don't forget to put the card. And what we want to do is, normally with this, you'd come here and just say like, do you support display grid? So when you do this, it's always like a property value pair, and the browser can then evaluate whether it can support that or not. And that's what I looked at in the video that I linked to in the description. But another way you can actually do it is writing selector here. And then you can put a selector to see if the browser supports something. So we can throw a focus visible right here and see if the browser supports that. So let's wrap this all in my @supports here. And what we can do is then we can say that the focus visible, it has that. And we can also throw our transform scale of 1.2 here. The only thing is we want to remove this focus from happening. So then we can come here also and say that my .btn focus has a transform of scale 1, just so it stays at its default size and this doesn't actually kick in or do anything. And so if we go and take a look now, we should be able to tab through. It looks exactly the same as it did before. And then if I hover on things, you can see they're still hovering, but if I click on one, it's not going to get that weird state that it was getting before. And I just realized this is actually causing a problem. Like here, you can still see that I can hover on top of these, but 3 isn't. And that's because 3 is actually active right now. 3 has a focus state, and it's saying, well, in the focus state, the transform should be 1. And so it's listening to that, and it's now that it has that, it won't actually grow anymore. So a little bit more work, but we'll just grab this and we can throw that there and say that we have the transform of a scale of 1.2 on hover. And now if we go and take a look, we should see they open and close, and we can hover back on top of everything. So it does take a little bit more work if you do want to worry about Safari and build that in, and you probably should, because Safari is a very popular browser, especially because it's everything on iOS. So it takes a little bit more work, but I think it's one of those things that's definitely worth doing because focus visible is just so handy and leads to such a better user experience for those who are on platforms that can take advantage of it. And eventually Safari will have it too, and then everyone will be happy. And if you love this and you love these simple things that you can do with CSS that solve problems, there's a couple of videos that are right here. There are a couple of other really simple things we can do with CSS that just make our lives a lot better. And with that, a really big thank you to my supporters of Awesome over on Patreon, Randy and Stuart, and of course all my other patrons for their monthly support. And lastly, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.